In Moscow, President Putin released a video message for his American counterpart announcing that he is open to dialogue to address what he called the most difficult problems, but warning that Russia's interests will be non-negotiable.
Our country stays open for direct and honest dialogue for the search of diplomatic solutions for the most complex issues. But I will repeat, Russia's interests, our citizens' safety are absolute, so we will continue strengthening and developing our army and navy, increasing their efficiency, providing them with the most advanced equipment.
Russian troops, as you know, have entered Ukrainian territory. Military vehicles were seen on the streets of the rebel-controlled Donetsk. Russia has even ramped up its military activities in southern Belarus, bordering Ukraine. Satellite images show a new deployment of more than 100 military vehicles and dozens of tents for troops being set up in southern Belarus. The images also reveal a new field hospital being added to a military garrison in western Russia that is close to the border with Ukraine.
Military vehicles rumbled through the outskirts of Donetsk early on Tuesday, just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin recognized the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic as independent statelets. A few hours after that, Russia's parliament also ratified the new treaties with the two separatist regions, a step that in theory could pave the way to Moscow building military bases there. Meanwhile, some residents in Donetsk hope the move will lead to peace.
It is very important for all of us that peace will finally come to our republic and to Luhansk. We just want peace and calm. For us, it is very important. We want to live as one big family together with Russia.
I fought a lot for this land and people to become independent, for this land to be recognized, and for people to live in freedom with the right to say their word, to make their choice and to get what the Republic has been going to for all these years.
Western countries have been warning for weeks that Moscow may be preparing for a possible all-out mass invasion to conquer its neighbour. Russia has long denied this, and Putin's moves so far have stopped short of such a scenario. Even so, Moscow's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk is seen by Western powers as an illegal step that could extinguish peace negotiations. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said Kyiv is considering breaking diplomatic relations with Russia as a result. His defense minister Alexei Reznikov also condemned the move.
They did the Latin step. They ruined our territorial dignity, our sovereignty.
Carnegie Europe analyst Judy Dempsey said Russia's moves so far in the Donbass region are a repetition of the pattern it used to seize Crimea in 2014.
The point is, you can't mince words when it comes to troops crossing into an independent sovereign country. This is a kind of second invasion. Using peacekeepers as a misnomer word for this is hardly disguising the fact that this is Russia de facto taking over this part of Ukraine.
Dempsey says the Ukrainian government may be trying to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia, but she warns that the risk of violence simply cannot be ruled out.
Well, let's cross live to WION's US correspondent Susan Tehrani, who joins us again today from New York City. Susan, we heard there that the Russian military build-up absolutely is continuing. We've also heard within the last 24 hours that the Secretary of State is cancelling his meeting with Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and that planned Biden-Putin summit is also off. Isn't there a bit of a contradiction, though, between the White House on the one hand scrubbing all of those meetings, but on the other hand saying, as President Biden himself suggested yesterday, that there might still be a narrow window open for diplomacy?
Well, yeah, there are a couple of things to look into this. First of all, in this scenario and in any scenario, perhaps in the last 1.5 years, when it comes to President Biden dealing with foreign policy issues, we should look at what he does and not what he says. And in this case, we see that President Biden has tried to use sanctions as a form of deterrent. This is what his administration says. And he says that we want to use these sanctions as a way to deter President Putin from moving forward, but we leave the door open for dialogue. This has been the playbook of the United States, not only regarding Russia, but other countries that it has imposed sanctions on. It always says that the room is open for a dialogue, whether or not it's intermediary sanctions, introductory sanctions, or hard-hitting sanctions. It always does say that the room is open for dialogue. However, because the red line was drawn last week by this administration that should Russia go into Ukraine in any form, then that summit between Putin and Biden would be scrapped, then the president perhaps at this point has no choice but to scrap that meeting, even though perhaps it might have wanted to hold that meeting. And that might have been one of the indications why on Sunday night, when Russia did in fact go into Ukraine and invade Ukraine, it was scrambling to decide whether or not to call it an invasion. And then when making that address to the world, President Biden called it, quote, a start of an invasion. But some are wondering whether or not the Biden administration is continuously moving the goalpost in order to, yes, leave open room for some sort of dialogue, but also adhere to his critics. Remember, he does have critics at home, and it is an election year here in the United States as well. So he has to consider that on the one hand, play the deterrent card on the other, and also send a hard-hitting signal to Vladimir Putin and the world as well. So yes, contradictory indeed, but not unprecedented.
So let's talk about some of those hard-hitting signals that the White House did send yesterday, because they did unveil what President Biden is calling a first tranche of sanctions. Some of them reached into the Kremlin, personally targeting some close friends and associates of Vladimir Putin. But there is a debate underway, isn't there, inside the administration and outside it, about just how much of the sanctions arsenal that you've prepared do you fling at Russia now, or to what extent the United States ought to be calibrating its response and waiting to see what Vladimir Putin does next? What's the balance in that discussion that's taking place at the moment?
Right. I mean, some are arguing that these sanctions against Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin and Moscow in general were weak. It's not going to deter Vladimir Putin. I mean, President Biden himself even made that comment during the speech. He said, what we did today is probably not going to deter Vladimir Putin from staging an all-out incursion into Ukraine, but quote unquote, I hope I am wrong. But for whatever reason, he has his policies. I guess it's deterrent, as we mentioned earlier. He decided to take these first step measures. The majority, I think on Capitol Hill at least, think that the sanctions should have been more hard-hitting. It should have at least gone after some sort of, higher echelons of the financial institutions inside Russia. And, these oligarchs inside Russia, they're for the most part used to Western sanctions. They're okay with living with the fact that they're not going to be coming to Europe or the United States anytime soon. But in defense of the Biden administration's sanctions, some are saying, and they're saying that this move against the two targeted banks, the VEB, this is the country's main development bank, and it was the first time perhaps that the United States had fully cut off a state-owned Russian financial institution. And what this signifies perhaps is that the Biden administration is willing to cut off major Russian banks from the U.S. financial system because the Biden administration and President Biden said that this is the start of an invasion. Perhaps this first move indicates that this was, as you mentioned, a first step of those sanctions. But also, again, you know, it remains to be seen whether or not it would deter Vladimir Putin or not. Just one caveat before I finish, that sovereign debt, regarding Russia's sovereign debt that the president made such a big deal of, it says in the fine print in the Treasury Department that it starts from March 1st. That means any sovereign debt before that, Russia can still work on, and that is a lot of money.
Interesting. And it was also notable last night that a senior administration official asked whether the US government might personally sanction Vladimir Putin, said all options remain on the table. Susan Tehrani, WION's correspondent, joining us live from Manhattan this morning. Thanks very much indeed for that.